Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. And you will wish to concern yourself with this watch because it's one of the most exciting of 2025. This is actually based on the 2024 GPHG iconic prize-winning Piaget Polo 79, that one in yellow gold, this one in white, with a blindingly white rhodium coating. So the watch is mechanically and physically identical to the yellow gold, with the exception of the aesthetic being somewhat different, and another difference I'll mention soon. But first let's talk about dimensions, because those have not changed. The 1979 original was somewhat smaller and quartz powered, whereas this is larger and mechanical. So 38 millimeters in diameter. It's actually quite slender. It's 7.5 millimeters thick. And then if I measure the first link on one side to the first link on the opposite side, the best way to understand this watch across the wrist is a measurement of 51 lug to lug. Now we're going to throw it on my wrist, and my wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. And Piaget was very careful to explain that they didn't want to change the sizing to the extent that the 1979 watch would suddenly become a watch for men only. They wanted this watch to be unisex, so they wanted it to be flat, they wanted it to be relatively constrained across the wrist and fit well on smaller wrists, and I believe it will. I think you could probably wear this watch on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, maybe 13 and a half if your wrist is really flat across the top. You could see that it will easily slide underneath a dress cuff of any kind, although Piaget was careful to note that this is not a narrowly tailored dress watch. They expect this to be more of an all-arounder, and certainly more so than the yellow gold. Taking a look again, you can just see that the bracelet outboard, let me show you just how stiff it is. It does have a little bit of stiffness, so you can't pull the bracelet straight down. That is 90 degrees relative to the case band. It arcs out a little bit, but it's not onerous. I do think you could wear this on a smaller wrist. Now, I mentioned there's a difference between this and the yellow gold, and it's one I cannot fully explain, but although they are of the same size and when measured with the same number of links in the bracelet, this one in white gold is roughly 6 grams heavier than the otherwise identical yellow gold watch. Fact I cannot explain, other than the fact that, well, these are handmade watches, so there may be some imprecision in the artisanal process. In terms of price, white gold is $82,500. The yellow gold was $75,000 and remains $75,000. So there was a little bit of a price disparity there. Now, in terms of how it's made, you're really looking at one of the key factors in its appeal. This is a very similar assembly method to what you'll find on the bracelet of the Chopard Alpine Eagle, where you have these large primary links, and then you have intermediate links that are countersunk into the side. Unlike the Alpine Eagle, where you can't see these intermediate links from the top, here, they are visible polished gadroons that extend the design of the case and the dial into the bracelet, and that is how it would have been on the originals in 1979. So you can see you have this sort of interlocking assembly method, and then that continues to the case, where the case is best described as sort of a log cabin made of gold. So the dial is solid gold with brushed sections and gadroons, and then if you look at these gadroons on the flank, these are actually inserted through slots in the case back, and then this case back panel is screwed on to ensure that these pieces don't move. So these quite simply slide in each instance, and then they are locked in place by the case back panel. On the dial side, we have a completely flat sapphire that is designed to be utterly flush, and so it is. A lot of artistry on this dial. Although it is spare, it is not difficult to read, and in favor of legibility, we have these Dauphine-style hands that are half frosted for better contrast. We have this polished dimple-style minute track, Piaget, nicely done, minimal text, minimal branding on the dial. And you can see that the fascinating method of fabrication, with this dial being a solid assembly of gold, you can really see along the edges of the dial how it slots into the dial well in this monoblock bezel assembly, which is a really impressive thing to see when it's still in components. We have a very robust twin trigger release double folding clasp, and you can see when it is closed it is pretty spare. There's no branding externally, no crest. Elegant, graceful, and minimalist. It's not going to stack up and add a lot of thickness. Now the swing arms of the bracelet are quite robust, which I find impressive because, again, for a watch that at first glance seems like it might be a dress piece, the solidity of the construction surprises. It's also more water resistant than you think. Dress watch would be 30 meters. This is 50, so still don't take it swimming, but Piaget engineered in a little bit more margin for error if you are caught in the rain or splash your wrist while washing your hand. Now, if you look at the underside, you'll appreciate that, yes, there's some adhesive from packing stickers here, but also that every single link here can be removed. So if you want to size this very precisely, you've got quite a bit of adjustability engineered into this bracelet. Now, it's fully integrated into the case band. One flows into the other, and you can see that the crown is relatively minimal. The idea is that it's not going to break up the symmetry of the case from side to side. Looking through the reverse of the case, we're going to move closer to my light source here. You'll notice that the watch, get my battery out of the way, the watch features the 1200P1 movement. Now, this is identical to the yellow gold with one distinction. The yellow gold watch features a colored gold rotor. This is a 22 karat gold rotor, but it's also been colored with a nickel anthracite to better match the grayscale aesthetic of the watch. The 1200P is an homage to the 1960 12P micro rotor automatic, which was Piaget's first ultra-thin automatic. Now, this was a bigger movement launched in the modern era, but an homage to the 12P. So we've got automatic winding with ceramic bearings for greater efficiency on the rotor, 44-hour power reserve, 3 Hz beat rate, 25 pivot joules, and you can see it uses a Edicron-style micrometric regulation system. It's 29.9 millimeters in diameter, which means it's a good size to fit this case, but then it's also slim at only 2.35 millimeters thick. There are some elements that are quite handsome. We have both polished screws and fire-blued screws. We have engine turning on the base plate. We have circular Côte de Genève across the bridges. We have a few elements that are particularly distinguished, such as the solarization on the ratchet wheel and the lovely snailed solarization on the crown wheel coral. All of that looks quite good. The beveling is handsome, though principally mechanical in its application. Nevertheless, it is up to the stature of the watch. Everything looks very tight and luxurious and premium. The watch is physically imposing, though it is not physically large. It has a lot of presence without being big. It has a lot of mass without being clumsy. It's a beautiful fusion of an incredibly dense and luxurious metal and an incredibly elegant and enduring shape. So reach out to me because I am able to source these primary markets. So we have these new if you're interested. Piaget Polo 79. You may be wondering, how many of these are they going to make? And that's a great question. I know from the yellow gold watch that as of Watches and Wonders this year, they told me they made 3 flights for the first model year with the yellow gold watch, which I was led to believe meant 3 flights of 300 watches. So you are talking very exclusive production for all versions of the Piaget Polo 79. Again, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.